Resuming debate. Reprise de débat. The honourable member for Calgary Confederation.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. It is my pleasure to rise today to speak to Bill S-240, a Senate bill which has been brought forward to this House by the Conservative member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan. I know the member is passionate about this issue and has worked hard to bring this legislation to this point, so I thank the honourable member. Madam Speaker, the RCMP have stated the obvious. They say that there are far more people in the world in need of a new organ than there are organs available. Like in any market, where a dollar can be made because demand far outweighs supply, people can turn to the black market to find what they need. When a person's life is on the line, the will to survive will outride morals. As this House may know, I've been a passionate advocate for finding improvements to Canada's organ and tissue donation systems. While 90% of Canadians support organ donation, just 20% are registered as organ donors. There are 4,500 Canadians desperate for a life-saving transplant, and 250 die each year before that life-saving transplant becomes available. If we can increase the supply of organs, we can reduce or eliminate the desperation that leads people to take such drastic measures to save their own lives. The problem of organ trafficking is not just a Canadian problem. The World Health Organization says that 10% of all organ transplants involve a trafficked organ. This is about 10,000 a year, every year. Iran, the country of Iran, stands alone in the world as the only nation with a legal organ trade. Yes, a legal organ trade. However, the trade is closely monitored and it has eliminated the wait list for kidneys. But I do not believe the ends justifies the means either. On a positive note, it has spurred the rate of donations from deceased donors in Iran, and it is important to note that deceased donors are not paid. Organ trafficking is a horrible phenomenon that can be crudely reduced to this. Rich nations take advantage of poverty in poor nations to satisfy their need for organs. A Harvard study showed the main purchasing nations were the United States, Australia, the United Kingdom, Israel, Japan, and yes, Canada. We target nations in South America, Asia, and Africa. In India alone, it is estimated 2,000 kidneys are sold each year. This trade is big business. Profits are estimated to be between $600 million and $1.2 billion per year. Organ trafficking is done through what is generally known as transplant tourism. Those in need of a transplant travel to one of these poor nations to undergo their transplant under the auspices of a vacation. There are even websites that offer all-inclusive transplant packages for these so-called tourists. A kidney transplant, for example, will mean a transplant vacation costing anywhere from $70,000 to $160,000. Canada does not have a law that prevents this. While kidneys are the most commonly traded organ, it doesn't stop there. Other common transplants involve hearts, livers, lungs, pancreases, corneas. Human tissue is also illegally traded. The trade involves three basic groups, according to the United Nations Global Initiative to Fight Human Trafficking. Traffickers who force or deceive victims into giving up an organ, victims who have their financial desperation used against them to give up their organs, and victims who are deceived into a medical procedure where they have an organ removed without their prior knowledge. Like any other illegal trade supported by organized crime, there are many layers of offenders. There are the recruiters, both for donors and recipients, the vulnerable people who make up the victims, the moral medical people in facilities, buyers, the facilitators, and more. So what do we do to address this problem? Of course, if we had enough donors in Canada, people would not be desperately mortgaging their homes or spending their retirement savings to get that life-saving transplant. I do not blame anyone facing death or taking whatever steps they can to save themselves. They are just as much a guilty party in this trade as they are a victim of the trade. However, we need to take a stand on this issue if we are going to stop it. Now, before I go any further, it is important to clarify that this would not prevent a truly informed and consenting person from donating an organ to someone in need. We are talking about unethically obtained organs. Bill S-240 seeks to amend the criminal code to create new offences in relation to trafficking in human organs. It also amends the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act to provide that a permanent resident or foreign national is inadmissible to Canada if the Minister of Citizenship and Immigration is of the opinion that they have engaged in any activities relating to trafficking in human organs. Now, we face an interesting problem in the world of illegally obtained organs. Unlike other contraband items, our customs officers cannot just seize an organ at the border. And how do you tell if that tourist coming back to Canada has the same heart they left with weeks earlier? It will be very, very difficult crime to detect. In many ways, the only way to detect this activity will be when those Canadians go to their doctor, who suddenly notices that they have surgical scars and signs of a new organ. Section 240 of the bill would require health professionals to notify a designated authority of such activity for investigation. Anyone found guilty of contravening these new prohibitions would be subject up to 14 years in prison. I do have concerns about the kind of relationship this will set up between doctors and patients, but there really is no other way to do this. So where does that leave us today? Madam Speaker, there is a saying that I think is very appropriate here. When all is said and done, there is often a lot said and little done. There have been 4 bills before Parliament in the past 10 years on organ trafficking, but yet we stand here today and we continue to talk. It's time we get something done instead. Until we take aggressive steps to stop organ trafficking, the practice will continue to victimize thousands more every year. Let's get this legislation enacted before the next election. If we do not, the whole process would have to start all over again. What a waste of time and money that would be. Thousands more will be victimized in the process. At the same time, let's pass legislation like Bill C-316, my bill, which would help eliminate the demand for organ trafficking. Let's also focus more effort on acting on the recommendations of the Health Committee to improve our domestic supply of organ and tissues. Let's better promote the registration of organ and tissue donors so that our supply will exceed our demand. Honestly, could you imagine one day when people come to Canada to get a life-saving transplant because we have too many available organs? Wouldn't that be an amazing goal? Again, I applaud the Conservative member for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, for putting this legislation proposal forward in the House, and I look forward to voting in support of it. Thank you, Madam Speaker.